Across the United States right now, immigration enforcement is one of the most heated issues. In Minneapolis and other cities, federal deportation operations have sparked widespread protests, intense clashes, and even legal rulings, ordering the release of detained children, raising urgent questions about force, fairness, and accountability. At the same time, mayors in major cities are moving to investigate and document federal immigration actions, highlighting deep political and community tensions. But beyond the headlines and protests lies another story. A story about the way money flows and where it actually goes and how it gets there. In this video, we're going to trace exactly how funds flow through detention centers from the public purse into the hands of facilities, contractors, and the broader enforcement apparatus. The money begins with public funding, mainly from federal budgets, sometimes supported by state or local budgets depending on how detention operations are organized. These funds exist to pay for detention operations, staffing, transportation, food, medical services, and facility costs. In this flow, the key point is simple. The funding starts as taxpayer-backed money that gets approved through budget decisions and then released into operational spending. That funding moves into a formal approval step, where government budget offices and legislatures authorize spending amounts. This stage sets the total pool that can be spent, what categories it can be spent on, and which agencies can use it. It's not the spending itself yet. This is the permission layer that creates the financial pipeline before any detention facility sees a dollar. Once approved, the money enters central government accounts, usually controlled by a treasury or central finance unit. This is where funds are held, tracked, and scheduled for release. This layer acts like the main reservoir. It doesn't run detention centers directly, but it controls when money can be distributed and ensures payments are made through official financial channels. From central accounts, money flows to the detaining agency, the organization responsible for enforcement and custody operations. This agency manages the detention budget and decides how much is directed to facilities, contractors, transport, staffing, and services. At this stage, the money becomes operational funding tied to detention outcomes, capacity needs, and day-to-day facility activity. Before money reaches many real-world service providers, it passes through procurement channels. Procurement teams create contracts, approve vendors, set rates, and define deliverables. This layer is the gatekeeper for the flow because it decides who gets paid, under what terms, and how costs are structured. Even in government-run facilities, procurement is often involved for food, equipment, software, medical services, and maintenance. From here, the money splits into two major channels: government-operated detention centers and contracted detention facilities. Government-operated centers spend through public payroll, public purchasing, and government service budgets. Contracted facilities operate through vendor invoices and contract payments. Both channels still originate from the same public funding base, but the flow mechanics look different once spending begins. In a government-operated facility channel, funds flow into staff payroll, facility supplies, utilities, transportation costs, and internal operations. Payroll is a major destination here, because detention requires staffing across security, administration, medical support, case management, and facility operations. The facility also spends on uniforms, equipment, cleaning, repairs, and basic daily requirements to keep operations running. In the contracted facility channel, the detaining agency pays a private operator under a contract structure. That operator's role is to run the facility, manage staffing, and provide required services. Payments may be based on capacity, per person per day rates, or service bundles depending on the contract. This channel concentrates money into the operator first, and then the operator distributes it across its internal costs. A major driver of spending is the occupancy trigger. When individuals are held, the process generates ongoing costs. Each person in custody creates a recurring flow of money into staffing, food, medical attention, supervision, and administration. The financial logic is simple. More people detained means more resources consumed, which expands the operational spend, especially in arrangements where payments scale with population. Another large channel is transportation and intake processing. Funds pay for transport contractors or agency fleets, fuel, vehicle maintenance, security during transfers, and intake operations. Intake includes identity verification, record creation, screening, and classification. These steps require staff time, software tools, and sometimes medical evaluation. Money flows here because every new arrival triggers a process that must be completed before detention operations continue. Food is a steady, predictable cost stream. Money flows to food suppliers, kitchen operations, equipment, and logistics providers. Whether meals are cooked in-house or delivered through vendors, the facility must pay for ingredients, packaging, storage, labor, and sanitation. Food spending repeats daily and scales with the detained population, making it one of the most consistent outflows in the entire structure. Detention centers also spend heavily on healthcare services. Funds move to medical staff, contracted clinics, pharmacies, lab testing, emergency transport, and hospital services when needed. Mental health services can also be included depending on policy and staffing models. This channel is controlled by approvals and protocols, but the flow is constant. The facility must pay for care delivery, medications, and compliance requirements. Another channel is physical operations, building maintenance, plumbing, HVAC, security infrastructure, repairs, inspections, pest control, and general facility upkeep. Money flows to maintenance staff, subcontractors, parts suppliers, and equipment vendors. Facilities are high-wear environments, so this stream repeats constantly. Even small failures create new purchases and service calls, which keeps money circulating through vendors and contractors. Security spending includes surveillance equipment, radios, protective gear, restraints, locks, cameras, and monitoring tools. It also includes training, incident response procedures, and specialized staffing. Money flows here because custody operations require controlled environments. This channel is often tied to compliance standards, audits, and risk management, so upgrades and replacements become recurring expenses. Detention centers rely on administrative operations, scheduling, records management, communication, legal coordination, and internal reporting. Money flows into software vendors, data platforms, ID management, document processing, and staff hours. Even if the facility is physically holding people, the administrative layer manages status updates, transfers, hearings, and release processing, which generates ongoing operational spend. Whether the facility is public or private, many services are subcontracted. Cleaning, laundry, IT support, interpretation services, maintenance, and medical staffing can be delivered by external vendors. The money flow here is agency to operator to subcontractors, or agency to vendor, depending on structure. This creates branching subflows, where many smaller entities receive payments from a central contract. Behind every payment is a financial rail. Funds move through government payment channels, banking partners, payroll processors, and invoicing platforms. This layer doesn't decide detention policy, but it enables the money movement. Vendors submit invoices, payroll runs on schedules, and payments clear through banks. This is where timing matters. Delays, holds, and verification checks can slow the flow even when funding exists. Some flows branch off into deductions and side payments. Taxes and payroll deductions applied to staff wages. Contract management costs appear as overhead. Insurance, compliance costs, audits, and legal expenses can also pull money into separate lanes. These are not the main story of detention operations, but they are always present in real financial arrangements and shape how much money reaches frontline services. Oversight creates another flow. Money funds inspectors, auditors, reporting requirements, and compliance programs. This includes internal compliance teams and external monitoring structures depending on jurisdiction. Oversight spending exists because detention operations must document activity, respond to incidents, and maintain standards. The financial effect is that part of the budget is continuously routed into review and enforcement layers. At the end of the chain, money lands in several final destinations. Staff wages land with employees, and then move into the broader economy through household spending. Vendor payments land with suppliers, service companies, and subcontractors. Facility operators retain revenue after costs depending on contract terms. Government retains some money as taxes and fees collected through payroll and corporate activity. This is where the flow settles. The process has recurring cycles. Facility capacity, staffing levels, and occupancy rates influence future funding requests and contract renewals. If costs rise or detention populations change, agencies adjust procurement, staffing, and service contracts. This creates a loop. Operational needs influence spending. Spending influences vendor capacity, and vendor capacity influences future contract structures and facility readiness. So the full flow is: public funding is approved, held in central accounts, released to the detaining agency, and distributed through procurement into government facilities and contracted operators. From there, it splits into payroll, transportation, food, medical services, maintenance, security, administration, and subcontractors. Payments move through banks and processors, branch into overhead and compliance, and finally land with workers, vendors, and operators. then cycle back through renewals as detention continues. That's the end of the breakdown. If this helped you understand what's really going on, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.